Need for Speed Underground. What do you think of when I say that? Do you think that's sliding around in your tuned out whip? Or building a 1 billion horsepower machine to do one thing? Go straight very quickly. Now this is quite funny because I already made a video talking about drag racing. This is before I knew. This was in, I thought Criterion was pretty much done and over at that point. But of course that's not the case. The next update is actually going to be the Underground update. So they've already mentioned this update is going to focus on drift and drag. And they already said in an interview that drifting is, well, already in the game, which makes you assume that drifting is gonna change. And it being based on Underground, I thought this would be a good video to dissect exactly what drifting and drag meant in Need for Speed Underground and see how it applied in Need for Speed today, which obviously, you know how the drifting is. It's okay. It's fine. This moment right here in the Underground intro, the ultimate Too Fast, Too Furious moment. Jump the damn bridge. That's what I want to see. I want to jump. There's plenty of bridges. You gotta do a bridge jump. Anyway, welcome to Need for Speed Underground. Let's play a second of that, but can't do anymore. This is drag racing in Need for Speed Underground. This is what it's all about. So let's kind of dissect exactly what it meant. Obviously, the big thing that makes me go, well, obviously, is the lane shifting. This is something that I definitely want to see moving forward. Now, you may not agree because they actually did iterations of it without the lane switching a little bit later, but it really makes use of a unique type of gameplay. And that's what I'm all about. Of course, I would be absolutely happy and fine overall with drag racing to any capacity, but we beat the damn train. That's what I'm talking about. They don't just have drag racing be the exact same as normal racing. They actually changed the handling and modified it to make it unique, meaning that you wanted to try it. And honestly, I love drag racing in this game. I don't think they've beat drag race. I don't think any game has beat drag racing since these games. Like these games, I mean, Underground 2, Most Wanted. And I think actually another point should really be focused on a separate kind of bar here, because that, I don't know, once again makes it feel a little bit unique. That one I can kind of be hit or miss on. I don't necessarily think we need to see another different type of speedo on the side, particularly for drag racing, but I think it would be a good debate because I really want to know what you guys would think in terms of drag racing. Lane switching, no lane switching, do you need the speedo, do you not need the speedo? And of course this, in my opinion, is the game that did it best. We've got these set pieces throughout it, like the train and such, that are perfectly orchestrated to the point where, yeah, if you don't go quick enough, you're gonna miss it. I mean, you're gonna hit it, it's gonna hit you. You understand what I'm saying. Alternative being, you get the ability to jump between the lanes as you want, but oh god, the gameplay is the same as it is in the rest of the races. And quite honestly, they've done that previously in 2015 and in Need for Speed Payback. They had drag racing that was just kind of fluid and you could do whatever you want. You move across lanes like this. And overall, it didn't really work. But none of those games really had proper straight line roads and the big jumps that could kind of make these races exciting. I think this one is, I don't want to say easy because they don't necessarily need to change the handling. We could just pretty much make full grip builds and have drag tires that make them even grippier. And I would say I really would love to see a nice little extra about this is that it would essentially increase the top speed of cars. I think it's time to allow a new meta if we're having a new class. You know what I'm saying? Because otherwise people are just going to be regarating. Drag tires, use them to increase the speed. And I guess the final question on drag racing then was, would you like to see round based? So would you see 3 rounds, or would you like the drag races to be long enough for them to be their own event? In Underground, they lasted about, what, 30 seconds? And is that enough to actually give decent money to the point where you'd actually play them? Because GTA has that very problem. The races are about a minute long, therefore they give you, well, basically 1% of the money you would get from doing a normal race, meaning they are utterly pointless. If you have it round based, well then ultimately you just keep going and going and going and going, and eventually someone wins the best 2 out of 3 or 3 races. But I think overall, if the money is right, then it doesn't matter. You can give me 10 grand for winning a drag race compared to the 30 you get in a speed list. Or hey, maybe you get a speed list playlist of a bunch of just drifting drag races. Or maybe it's just a free roam thing. There's so many questions to answer. It's just creating more. But I think, in my opinion, I'd like events to be solo or single. If it's in a speed list, then you can do a 3-rounder. Drag tires should be introduced. We could definitely reduce the steering angle and make it lane switching, potentially. I think that would be a new way to play. Though I wouldn't mind if lane switching isn't there, just as long as drag racing in itself is there and the other elements are there, and it's got to be worthwhile, like 10 grand a drag race or something, at least. Now, before we get into the actual races in this, I wanted to show you the drift tracks available in this game. They use the kind of URL based tracks where they're actual tracks for drifting in this game. Now, they do have actual genuine tracks in Need for Speed Unbound that we could use for drifting, and I think that would be super cool and a really good use case for them, because I feel like they're usually kind of forgotten about. But there's some really cool areas like the big drift circle that you can go around and round and round. Essentially, there's perfect pieces in this map that have never really gone used in drift events because ultimately they weren't very good. So what we do know about drifting is that they are, again, going to do something different to change it. So it's safe to assume they're going to change how the drifting kind of works, because that is a point that a lot of people have mentioned, and I think the main problem they had for the longest time is that instead of making drifting its own separate entity, people assumed what they meant is that, well, they wanted the ability to drift around or grip around, and they had to make it competitive, and then they kind of blended into one, and so neither ended up very good. They were quite different handlings. But in this game, well, it's completely different to the normal handling. It is different because drifting is inherently more different. And of course, Need for Speed should always be an arcade racing game. And I think this is the best example. Again, and this is the Underground update. So I'm hoping drifting is more inspired by this. I don't need it to be simulation. I don't need it to be like me drifting in Gran Turismo or me drifting in Assetto Corsa. What I want it to be is fun and fluid. I actually kind of prefer the drifting in Motorfest compared to Need for Speed currently. How cool would it be to get this top-down camera as well? I don't know if that would work. I don't know if I need that, to be completely honest. But again, I think this is fun, fluid, and honestly, it works incredibly well on even a keyboard, because I forgot to plug my controller in before I launched this game, and if you know old PC games, it's basically dead in the water at this point of me trying to do that, unless I restart the game, and I can't be bothered. But Need for Speed is generally played on a controller, and if it ended up something more Car X kind of inspired, I would not be mad. Like, at all. Now, the nice thing is we actually have the new realistic smoke already, so that's already a nice kind of staple point that definitely will improve things. But drifting right now, it's not the worst it's been. In fact, in 2015, as much as we praised the game for kind of bringing back the Underground theme, didn't really bring back drifting in an incredible way. The weird snapping, for example, really messed things up. But sometimes the game just doesn't know what you want to do, and it's because of that weird blended handling. If I want to drift, well, sometimes it's like, oh, you want to grip? No, you want to drift? You want to grip? It kind of fights itself constantly to figure out what the hell you're trying to achieve. And so having a completely separate drift handling really helps because of the fact, well, separation, just it knows what you're trying to do. Now, one thing you'll know from previous games like Need for Speed Heat is that when they try to think about, all right, what do people want to do to drift? They want to lose grip at the rear, and that's how they want to slide. Well, most people ended up in Need for Speed Heat putting on drag tires to increase the grip, because Need for Speed is built on actual genuine physics and then simplified for the arcadeness. So when you actually build a real car, what you do is you actually put some of the grippiest tires you can think of when you've got like high amounts of horsepower and stuff. Of course, if you've got, you know, a crap little diesel, I don't know, something rubbish, like 50 horsepower, then you put some rubbish tires on, and of course, then it slides. But that same thing doesn't happen when you go big power, which is what we're going to end up doing when we're drifting around in Need for Speed Unbound. So it's pretty safe to assume they're going to change up the handling somehow. They're not just going to add new drift events, because that would be a major cop-out. It's worth noting that everything we fed back at the event was essentially based on the game as is, and these ideas ultimately I've not seen later down the line in terms of updates. But the idea overall of this Kaizen thing they're doing with Need for Speed is to build small and then build from that if people perceive it well, and ultimately build from these game modes and things they create, and new handling types to create, in the end, something huge, which actually, if you think back, the best example of this would probably be the Crew 2, when they added the demolition cars, and then now we've got Demolition Royale, and then we have the Chase, where you can actually take down cops and robbers type game mode. It all kind of adds up and makes sense. So if I was going to tell you which of these two new modes I'm probably most excited for, and I kind of hope has the most time put into it, is drag racing. Drifting is ultimately going to be handling that we'll probably be able to do on the same events we currently have, and they'll probably have new events, but ultimately we'll be able to now drift a little bit better than we did before. We've been drifting for a while. It's possible if you're really good and you really put the work in, but it needs to be nicer to play. It needs to be nicer overall. You want to do it more. Drag racing, I kind of want maybe a more aggressive camera, the FOV changing a little bit more often, more frequently, a little bit more camera shake. It'll be cool to see the speedo change. And of course, as mentioned, there's no drag events in the game, so they're going to have to build the whole event system from go, and hopefully we get some new cars to supplement that. And I think maybe in drag races, like, increase the traffic, maybe allow you to change the amount. Maybe we're getting too complicated here. This is kind of maybe the traffic is enough right now. What the either way, that's what I think this update is going to be about primarily, and it's new gameplay, and that is so much more important than just car. Anyway, let me know what you think, and check out these if you're interested in more deets.